Hey everybody, it's Brian here. I want to give you some suggestions on how to make a poster to present your thesis project or potentially any other projects that you have to make a poster for. I want to talk first about some sort of poster making philosophies and general principles, and then I want to spend a lot of time in the software giving you tips on how to get the software to cooperate when you're working on making a large scale poster. So if you've been to a poster session before, you know that, it's these big rooms with lots of posters and the presenters are all supposed to stand by the poster. And so when you're designing a poster, you need to consider that environment and the type of people that you'll be interacting with as a presenter at those conferences or like Mount David or our fall thesis session or those things when they happen in normal life. So I've sort of thought about it and I've come up with three general kinds of people that you will encounter when you're presenting at a poster session. One type is the casual passerby. They'll come by, they'll skim your poster, certainly read the title, look at graphs and pictures. If you have any text that sort of like jumps out, like it's bigger, a different color, it's more prominent on your poster in some way, they'll read that, but they're not going to get into the fine print. And I feel like those people deserve to know at least something about your project. So you should design your poster with those people in mind, that they can come in and read just sort of the highlights of your poster and walk away with a basic understanding of what you did without talking to you, without reading the details. So think about that level of poster design. The second type of person that you will likely encounter is the reader. They're going to come and they're going to not talk to you, and they're going to just read your poster. So as you might imagine, you should prepare for these type of people. They should walk away with a more detailed understanding of your project. You should have, if you follow the APA guidelines, you'll have the intro, method, results, discussion. I feel like you're not limited to those sections on a poster. You have some more flexibility, so you could have some other options so that when somebody is finished reading your poster, they have a pretty good understanding of what you did, why you did it, what you found, that type of thing. And then the third type of person, I think, can often be the most frustrating type of person to encounter at a poster session. You've put all your work designing your poster, writing all this text, proofreading and all that. They're going to walk up. They're not going to read anything, not even your title. And they're going to look at you and they're going to say, "What did you do your project about?" And you're like, "I just look at the poster for." So but these people you should be prepared for. They're very common. So what this means is that for your project, you should have like at least a 2-minute pitch, maybe like up to a 5-minute pitch describing your project. You're going to give this pitch many times during a poster session. So you should rehearse it a little bit, think about what you're going to say, think about maybe what you're not going to say. And so how does this get into your poster design? Well, this is where you want to design your poster to act as a visual aid for yourself as you are talking about your project. So you want to have graphs, you want to have maybe a flow chart. This is what I did, and then I did this next, and then we have these two options. And so you can really think about your poster as an audio visual, or not audio, but a visual aid for yourself to deal with these people who are not interested in reading your poster. And so that's sort of the third level of poster design that I think you should be thinking about. And if your poster can capture all three of those types of interactions, then I think it's going to be a pretty good poster. So with that in mind, let me share my screen here. We'll go into the VPN because I like to work with a lot of different apps. And so the VPN allows me to do screen sharing with a lot of different apps. There are basically two software products that Bates has available for you and that are recommended for poster design. One of them is Adobe InDesign. I don't really like InDesign for poster design. If you're already an expert in InDesign, by all means use it. It has a lot of features which make it kind of more complicated than it needs to be, and a little bit harder to learn. So if you're not familiar with InDesign, I would definitely not recommend firing it up just for a one-off project. Instead, I really recommend PowerPoint. So let's go to PowerPoint. I like PowerPoint for a couple reasons. One, I found that most people have used it. And two, I find like even if you haven't used it that much, it's relatively straightforward to figure out for poster design. So we have we're going to create a new document here in PowerPoint. We're just going to do a blank presentation. You may be tempted to find one of these other sort of prefab templates, I strongly recommend against these. These are all designed for presentations on a computer, not designed to scale up to the level of a poster. So just start with a blank presentation and we can talk about how to turn this into a poster. So what we're going to do is, again, PowerPoint, usually you're going to have, if you were doing a presentation, you would have like a whole bunch of slides that you would show one after another. For a poster, you're going to have one really big slide. And so we're going to delete all this stuff. And before we put anything in here, we need to resize the poster or resize the slide. So we go to design, choose slide size and custom slide size. And so we're going to just put in our own inches. So the height is the most important thing. For printing at Bates, they recommend a 36-inch high poster. You have some more flexibility on the width. I recommend like a 46 or 48-inch poster, usually works pretty well. And so once we've done that, we can resize our poster. We can ignore all this because we don't have any content yet. The very first thing you want to do is resize your slide because it's going to, if you had words and pictures and stuff in here, when you resize it, it needs to make choices about, is it going to stretch them? Is it going to, you know, so it's really kind of problematic. So that's why the very first thing you do, resize your slide. And now we have, it doesn't look any different, but we have a really big poster. Oh, hello, Julia.
Hi. Wait, Julia, are you getting your tablet? Yes. I'm supposed to read.
Julia's getting her tablet so she can read. Okay, back to this. So it doesn't look any different, but in fact, this is a monstrously large slide here. So we're going to go to the insert menu and we'll put in a title using a text box. So I'll put title goes here and oh my gosh, look how small that is. And that's an 18-point font. So one of the big challenges of doing a poster is using tools that maybe you don't use that often in PowerPoint in order to work at this scale. So what we can do, we can Control A to select all that text and then make this larger. And so now we're at a 66-point font and it still looks pretty small. And so another feature that I like to use a lot when I'm working with poster scale is this often overlooked zoom feature down here in the bottom. And it's going to zoom in on whatever object on the page you have selected. And so, you know, it doesn't always just zoom in on the center. So if I don't have anything selected, it does zoom in on the center. But when I have this title text box selected, then it goes there. So this is really a nice feature to switch the zooms, whether I'm working at, you know, the big level where objects are going and things like that versus small level like editing text and those sorts of things. So I have my title centered here and I can maybe do something a little bit more informative, but I'm going to leave it like that. And so basically what we're going to be doing is we're going to be putting in a bunch of different text boxes. And so we can have our title, maybe we'll have like a subheader, we'll have our intro go here, and we can do formatting on the text boxes to make them look a little bit more interesting. And so the format menu, when I have this selected, the format menu appears. And this is where maybe we can make this look, well, let's get that looks more like a subheader. And so, yeah, we go to format and we can choose some of these prefab designs, and all of these prefabs work pretty well. But one thing you might choose to do as a way to sort of set this text apart visually is to fill in the text box. And we can make this different sizes. It doesn't need to just fill our text. We can do an outline around our text box. And then from this format menu, we can also click in here. If we want to get really detailed, you can right click and choose format shape. And it's going to open up all these different options. One thing that we're going to need to change is the border. Working at this poster scale, the default border is super, super skinny, like a 0.75 point font. And so let's change this to something that is actually going to appear, maybe like even a 15, that's a little much, 10-point font. And so now it actually looks like something when I'm working at the poster scale. So being able to grab these different objects and change their formatting, we can, and then if you want to change the text, that's just back on the home menu. We can do this sort of reverse white text on a dark background and make it italics or something. So all the text formatting we can just do on the home ribbon, but then all the shape formatting, like the text box formatting, we can do either through the format ribbon or by right clicking and pulling up this format shape panel. So I'm gonna drag this around and relocate it. One thing so let's say I want to have a bunch of subheaders, my method and results, all with the same format. I find the easiest way to do that is using our friend copy and paste. So I don't want to have to create, if I want them all to look the same, then I don't want to have to start with the default text box and then have to reconfigure everything. I'm gonna, just take that one idea and just make a bunch of different copies of it. And that way I don't need to do a lot of reformatting. And even if, let's say I decide to change my mind, I don't like the green. Let's go in with, or the green on white. Let's go in with a nice holiday mode red. So I can either go in and reformat all these guys, or maybe it's easier to just make more copies and then edit the text. So do bear in mind that using the clipboard can be a huge time saver when you're working with multiple objects that have the same configuration. So I would put this over here somewhere, drag this around. So I wanted to offer some other suggestions about how to work at this poster scale. When we zoom out, we see that there's a whole lot going on here. Notice one thing, as I'm dragging this text box around, it's kind of helping me line up with other objects on the page. So here I can see that both corners are lining up. If I let go there, it's doing the horizontal alignment when I'm next to this other text box. So there's already a lot of help in terms of getting these objects. I want to have maybe my intro there, and then I would have like the text of my intro and a second text box below that. And so it's giving me some guidance in terms of helping me line those different objects up. So that's good. But I wanted to show you some other ways that you can help do this sort of larger arrangement of your objects. Under the view menu, you can turn on rulers, which is going to put these rulers on both horizontally and vertically. And this tells you in inches where objects are on the page. Notice 0 is the center in both the horizontal and the vertical planes here. And so this really helps. If I want to make sure that I have like a 1-inch margin or something like that, then I can come over here and, I have 48-inch width here. So that means that 24 inches is this half. So that means that 23 inches is 1 inch from the edge here. So having the rulers is one way to just sort of make sure things line up. It's also a good way to see like how big is this font actually. And so I can look and say, okay, this box is a little bit less than 1 inch wide or inch high. And so having the rulers is a helpful way to sort of assess what is this going to look like at full scale. You can also turn on these grid lines, which superimpose 1 inch grid over the entire poster. These obviously aren't going to print out, but these are just there for you to help you line up different objects with each other and see how big they are in 1 inch increments here. And then one of the most interesting ones I find are the guides. And so the guides, when you turn those on, what it's going to do is it's going to put these dotted lines, which again aren't going to print out, but they're at the center of the vertical and horizontal axes here. So this is a great way. If I want to make sure that my title is at the center, notice when I click on it, I have these resizing dots on the corners and in the middle. So if I put this right in the middle there, now the dots are right on this guide. So I know that my title is exactly centered on my poster. And I can center things in the other direction as well. If you want to have more guides than this, it's easy enough. You can, so by hovering over the guide, it shows us that we can relocate it. But even more useful is if we hold down Control while we scoot the guide, we can create a copy of it and put it where we want it to. So if we want to have one here, like 1 inch from the edge, I hate that the cursor sort of blocks. It's a little bit hard to see, but that looks about right. So that way I can create my own guides at other useful places on the slide, like, on the edges, or if you have a bunch of objects you want to get lined up in some way, you can put your own guides there as a way to help you line those up. So we're going to do a bunch of text boxes. I want to show you a little bit. Let's grab some text to work with. I have my detailed introduction about the quick brown fox who jumps us over the lazy dogs. Let's just grab some text. All this to say, you can write a lot of your text in another app in Word, for example, if that's easier for you. And then just paste it in. So we'll insert another text box. We'll create this and we'll use this as like the text for our intro. So zoom in there. Now, a big wall of text like this doesn't look great. And it's kind of daunting to read. And so one thing I would recommend is trying to turn this into like bullet points. I find bullet points are a much easier way to sort of process a lot of text. And so we can take our text, and obviously I would change the writing. I might make my sentences shorter and more concise, things like that, in order to have bullet points instead of a big block of text. But that's the basic gist of how to get more detailed text into your text box. One thing I wanted to show you, though, is so working with the text box, I can relocate it. The cursor is changing depending on where I'm hovering my mouse over. So relocating it, I have this 4 arrow button when I'm on the edges here, and that allows me to move it around the page. But then as we were talking about these resizing ones, I can drag and change the width using that item. I can change it doesn't work as well. When we start working with images, you'll see that in dragging the corners and stuff, you can resize the images. If for any crazy reason you want to rotate your text, you can do that using the rotating feature. Excuse me. But one thing I want to show you, which doesn't get a lot of use, is we know about left justify. We already talked about centering things like for header titles and subtitles. But I like this full justify option. And what this does is it sort of gives us a nice clean left border as well as a right border. You can see it's sort of changing the spacing down here. If we compare, especially with this larger block of text, the left border is nice and clean, but the right margin here is kind of a little bit chunky and not very clean looking. This full justify is what newspapers use to get that column looking effect. And so if I had another text box next to it, it sort of gives a nice clean looking gap between them. And so it gives your poster an overall more organized, clean look. So that can function as some text for our intro, and we'll put in, let's do our methods down here. And we have more text for our methods and all that sort of stuff. So let's get something, we want more than just text in here. Let's get some images in here. So one thing that is important to consider when you're talking about images is making sure that you have images that are going to look good when they're printed at a poster scale. So anything taken with a nice digital camera or even a decent smartphone is going to be pretty good for printing on a poster scale. So the thing that you want to be cautious of is finding images on the internet and thinking that they're going to print out well. And so I want to show you some ways to get images from the internet in a smart way and be able to check and see whether they're going to print well or not. So you can use Google image search. So we're talking about foxes jumping over dogs and all that. So we can go to Google Images and we can do fox and dog. And so it's going to give us a bunch of super cute pictures. But in order to make sure that they are actually going to print at a reasonable resolution, what you can do is here in Google Images, go to Tools, and then change the size that it will return and say, I only want large images. And so now I can grab this. Oh, this is super cute. How about this one? And so when I click on one of these images, you can see when I hover over it, it's giving me the dimensions in pixels down here in this corner. I would recommend if you're going to have it be, if you're going to have an image be any size on your page, then you want to have at least 1,000 pixels in both directions as just sort of a rough guideline. Rough, get it? Because dogs. Never mind. Okay, so we're going to copy this image, and then we're going to use our clipboard to just paste it in, and it's going to drop it. Oh, and that is in fact a nice sized image, so we can see how that works on the page in our poster. And we can put this where we want it. And here's the resize. Here's where the resize tools come in more relevant, because I can grab these corners and I can resize, and it's smart enough that it's not going to distort the aspect ratio. As I change the height and width, it's keeping them the same so that it still looks like the original photo. So do be cautious of dragging from the side, because it will allow you, when you do that, to distort the image laterally or vertically. And I find a lot of people say, okay, here's the space I have for my image, and then the image doesn't exactly work in that space. And so they'll distort the image to get it to fit. And I find that so distracting. Like when my grandparents were watching TV on the widescreen and they have it like stretch and everybody's head looks, yeah, anyway, don't do that. It's very distracting. But you can resize pictures, obviously, using the corners and not worry about having your image be distorted. And I do encourage pictures. Pictures are really helpful for, when you see a poster that's just a wall of text, it's really daunting. People don't want to just jump in. So having pictures that are relevant to your study, images from your study, if you have something like that, or if you're doing a community-based thing, you can have images of the kids you worked with, or the street that your placement was on, or something like that, just to have some way to draw people in and add some visual variety into your poster presentation. Another way to add some visual variety that communicates is with graphs. We've already talked about graphs. I've talked about graphs a lot in my other discussions. I have just a quick sample graph. I do all my graphing in Excel. And so I've created a graph here in Excel. And I want to do all of my formatting work in Excel. I find it so much easier. I'm going to change the colors. I'm going to make sure my axes are labeled and I have the grid lines and all that stuff. I'm going to do that in Excel. And then once I'm happy with that, this is where I can copy. And since Excel and PowerPoint are both part of the Microsoft Office suite, they play really nicely with each other. So we can just copy that in Excel, paste it into PowerPoint here, and then here's where we can do our placement and resizing. One thing that I find a little bit annoying about working with this is, notice I resized this, but the fonts didn't change. And so you can try and make that consideration if you want to deal with font sizing in Excel, and then when you paste over, it'll already be at the right size. But another approach might be even easier. Of course, you can resize the fonts one at a time here in PowerPoint as one option. But if you've done a lot of formatting work in Excel and don't want to deal with this resizing issue, what we can do is, when we copy over, instead of using the default paste command, we can paste as an image, paste this picture here. And so now I can't edit any of these individual components. I can't resize the text label, but the advantage here is that when I resize it, it's going to scale everything exactly the same way. And so that means that I can't accidentally change the formatting of these different components just by resizing it. I don't have a recommendation in terms of which of these is better. I think it depends on the circumstances, but just so you know, both of those possibilities exist, so that you can choose the one that is most appropriate for your needs. And then once we're in PowerPoint, this is where we can do other things, like we can format the picture, format this shape. And this is where we can add like a line around it, change this to, put a border on there, change the color of the border, all these sorts of things using the extra formatting features in PowerPoint. You can add additional features to your graph, more text. You can say, hey, this is, let's do insert, and we'll insert a shape. Like maybe we want to have, here's this arrow that points to condition B there, the all important condition B. And then if I want to format this shape, again, you can right click you could say, I want that to be a whole lot thicker of a line. Let's go with, we'll do a 9 point. There we go. That's a nice imposing arrow. So this is the way you can add, using PowerPoint's design features, add additional stuff to things that you've already created in Excel. So that's inserting graphs and another useful way to add visual appeal. And the last type of thing I want to show you in terms of using items from other applications is you can insert tables. So I've created this table in Word with my totally bogus results here. In fact, comically impossible. Okay, I don't know if it's comically, but it is truly impossible. So we created this table, and I want to put this into my poster as well. In order to make sure I'm selecting the whole thing, it gives us this handy sort of select all option in the upper left. So when I click there, it selects the entire table, then I can copy and then paste this in. And it shrinks everything down, but I can use my resizing features. I can resize using the text, and then resize these different components. And just like with graphs, if you wanted to paste this as an image and not deal with some of this formatting changes as you scale this up to match your poster, then that is an option as well. All right, so let's see. So we have a lot of stuff going on. I would caution you at this point that designing a poster is probably a lot more time consuming of a project than it seems like it is on the surface. If you've never designed a poster before, I would budget quite a bit of time, and I feel like it's actually fun time. This is a great opportunity to sort of test your creativity, give your, find colors that work together, things like that. Another thing, actually, before we even fire up the software, thinking of designing a poster, and especially when we go back to that conversation about these 3 different types of presenters, if you're not used to working with PowerPoint, and actually even if you are, I find it really helpful before I design a poster to just get a piece of paper and sketch things out. Like just do a rough, I'm going to put my title here, here's a couple images, and here's roughly where I'm going to arrange them. And just having a basic outline of, or a basic sort of design of what you're shooting for means that when you open up the big blank PowerPoint slide, you're not going in blind. And a lot of people can find that really overwhelming. So having sort of a basic idea of where you're going to be going with this is really, really helpful. And so the last thing I want to show you before we start looking at some examples here is how to format the background. I said don't use those prefab templates, which are designed for like verbal presentations. So you can format the background, fill in with a color. If you do this, I would suggest a very, very light color so that it adds a little bit of pop to your poster, but it's not sort of overwhelming. And then you can, once you choose a nice background color to work with, then you can sort of coordinate your other darker colors like the borders around your objects or the color of your text to sort of go with that. I have a green thing going on, so let's see if, that's not the worst thing ever. And there are other options, like you can do a gradient fill, which I like doing a lot. And so a gradient fill, let's zoom out a little bit, is a way to have like the color sort of gradually changing. And you can have these different items are going to impact how the gradient is changing. And if you double click on them here, or I'm sorry, change the color feature, this is where you can introduce new colors, get sort of a sunset effect going on. I'll go with a red to orange up to maybe a yellow, and then lastly up to a white. And then you can change how gradually it's being affected as you go through there. So that's one option. I like this option. This is way too strong, in my opinion, for a poster. One thing you could do is if you have a lot of strong colors is you can change the brightness. If you can sort of reduce things, oh, that's not the right one. But you can change the the strength of these colors using the transparency feature for each one. And so we can make these a little bit more transparent and let that natural white background sort of come through. It's going to diminish the strength of the colors, but make things a little bit less bold and therefore more readable. You can insert a picture from a file if you want, or it has these different textures that it suggests. I don't love this as an option, but if you find a good, simple, non-distracting background, that can work. So anyway, it helps to have something that's just not a regular white background, but it can be a pretty subtle thing. Okay, so let's talk about printing. So you don't have, I assume, a large format poster printer available to you while you are designing this. You get one shot at printing it, but you can still print, and I still find that useful. Is if you go to the print here in PowerPoint, so the default is it's showing us how this is going to look on a page. And this is, if you print this out just to a regular printer, it's going to print a mini version of your poster. I find this immensely useful. It looks so different on the page than it does on the screen. And this is where you can see, do my objects line up? What do I think of these colors? How do the images relate to the other items on the page? So just printing a mini, I think, is an essential step. And I find I often print like half a dozen minis as I do things, I make changes, and I want to see how those changes look. And so if you have a color printer, but it's not a large format printer, you can still print, and it's resizing it to print a mini version of your poster. And those are great. Another useful thing that you can do is to turn off that. The reason it's a mini is because you have this is the default item here, the scale to fit paper. If you turn that off, what it's going to do is, so this is showing a regular size piece of paper, and it's printing the center of the slide at scale. So this is another really useful, different but useful way to print your poster. And this is a way to see, like, how readable is my text? How is my image that I've chosen? Is that printing at a decent quality? Or when I blow it up really big, does it look all pixelated and grainy? So what you can do is it's only going to print the center of your slide. So you can say, all right, let's check out this Fox picture. I want it to live in this corner eventually, but just for test purposes, I'm going to drag it to the center of the slide and go to print, and then I'm going to print this out. And this way I can get a good sense of exactly how big is it going to look at full scale and what is the quality of the image at full scale. So the scale to fit paper version of printing is useful, and then turning that off is useful in a different way. Okay, so once I have this done, I have actually a version of my poster. This is a pretty simple. So just some different experimentation. I've arranged this. I could have done more with my subheader text, but you should make sure your name is on it. If you end up bringing your poster somewhere besides Bates, you should probably put, your institutional affiliation on there. I've gone with a pretty basic, like 3-column look where I put most of my graphics here in the center. But you can also be creative with these options as well. So this kind of is a version that's, I'm playing around a little bit with different color on my, my text boxes and things like that. My, the mandatory dogs playing poker image there, because it just adds a touch of class. But I want to show you some other posters from students from a while back, actually. And I want to talk about, these are not, I'm not presenting these as posters that are like the best posters ever, but these have elements about them that I really like that I wanted to highlight. So let's take a look at these and talk about what is going well with these posters. So here's a poster from years ago. I like this poster for a number of reasons. She has a lot of good visual components to her poster. She just found these on a Google search, including the very old-fashioned iPod going on. It's just a way to, add something, some splash of color, some meaningful. So she's talking about teenagers in the material world. So she has, objects that teenagers might want to buy. I also like visually how she has laid out her text boxes with these backgrounds, and then she has these white borders or white sections between them. I think that adds a nice sort of inviting feel, that it's not just a lot of text. There's some way that she's visually broken things up. She has a graph. She integrates the colors of her graph really well with the colors that she's chosen for the rest of the poster. And then she also has not just the APA style table, but this sort of diagram down here showing the relations between some of her different variables. And I feel like this is the type of thing that's going to be helpful when you're doing that verbal part of your poster, to have even a simple thing like this as a way to really give yourself something to point at, something to add a visual component to your elevator pitch. Let's get another one here. All right, so this one was, she's really going outside the standard look, doing a poster on women in sports, and she wanted that classic photo of the Brandi Chastain, the U.S. women's soccer player who celebrated, ripped off her jersey and, power on the field. So she wanted to highlight this photo, which really draws you into the poster. And but you have to do it in a way that's not distracting. And so I worked with her on this to really wash out. We put another layer, another big like half transparent white image over the entire background of the poster, so that when she has text here, it's still readable. And then we have, obviously this part has nothing over it, just to highlight that particular center of the image. But the image does continue on behind the other components of her poster. And so that's kind of tricky, but it's a pretty bold use of an image there in the poster. Let's see. This one I feel like there's, it's a lot of text. So I feel like if you can get by with less text, that would be good. But I want to highlight a couple creative things she's doing to make this a little bit less text heavy. I liked how she's finding clip art and sort of putting it behind the text as a way to just add some visual elements. And she does some of that up here in the title as well. Just get some clip art. Clip art is really useful because if you find clip art, it is usually vector-based, so it scales to any level. So clip art is definitely a good tool when you if you're having trouble finding good high-quality photo images. Another thing that I like about hers is thinking about that browser, or the person, the casual passerby, they come by and they're not going to read all this text by any means. So she has set aside some text with different colors, and I felt like if I were just sort of giving this a minute or 2 minute overview, this is the text I would read first. And so this is a way to highlight text that is the most prominent text that somebody who's just skimming the poster would read first. So has some good stuff going on there. Then the last one, sort of on the opposite side of the spectrum from the very text heavy version here, this has, I would say, if I were judging this, I think this needs more text. I would like to appeal to the reader a bit more than this poster is doing. But one thing I really wanted to highlight with this poster is she has just this amazing, she created these graphics, and this is like a great way to accompany that visual presentation. We started with mice, and we took 6 of them and did this thing, and we put a different 6 and did this other thing. And so I'm honestly not sure exactly what's going on with this poster, but I know that when she presents verbally with it, she's giving herself some really useful guidelines to add to her verbal presentation. So I think that this is a really sort of very ambitious version of that goal. So I wanted to highlight that one as well. So that's about what I wanted to say about posters. Let's go back to the quick brown fox version of the poster here for our final version, our final example. So with that, I'll stop sharing my screen here. And I will just say that I wish you good luck in planning and creating your poster. I'm certainly available. If you want to shoot me an email, I love to talk about design elements, or I can look at a draft, and I'm glad to offer suggestions. I've done some graphic design work. So I have experience making sort of judgments about what works or how to solve those sort of visual problems that you may be wrestling with. And then if you end up with a poster that you're proud of, definitely send it my way. I love looking at student posters, and we have some hanging in the hall on the 3rd floor at Pettingill that the faculty have selected as particularly good examples of thesis posters. So certainly check those out. And if you have one that you want to nominate to be hung on the wall in a future year, then certainly send it my way. All right, well, thanks for your attention. Let me know if you have questions, and I hope you guys have a great day.